Do you want to know if the 2021 real estate market is at the top of a bubble? Are we about to crash, or are things going to continue to move up? Well, if that's the question in mind, then hello, friends. You've landed at the right podcast. Today's guest is the CEO of Altos Research, Mike Simonsen. I've known Mike for a lot of years because I enjoy real estate data. And what Mike provides is not just the data points, but he makes it available and explicable to not just realtors, but to our neighbors who are thinking of buying and selling, which helps you make great decisions no matter what's happening in the bigger market. So get your notebook and pen and be ready to take some notes. You're going to enjoy this conversation with Mike, and I'll see you on the other side. So you're Mike Simonsen. So you're like famous in data world, which means you're only famous with a dozen people, but that's okay because nerdy people would know you, but non-nerdy people need to know who Altos Research is. So why don't you tell them in like your elevator speech what exactly you do, and then I can start asking you some questions about real estate and data as it pertains to 2021 and beyond.
Sounds great. Okay, so I'm Mike Simonsen. I'm the founder, CEO of Altos Research, and we do real estate data. We analyze essentially every house for sale in the country every week, and we bubble up the analytics on that. And that's like pricing and changes in pricing and supply and demand. And, we package that up for like realtors to put their own brand on it and put it in hands of their customers and their buyers and sellers to both inform, but also to establish yourself as the expert and be the one with the resources. And so it's about the data, but it's also really about reaching buyers and sellers.
Well, and the thing I love about Altos Research, you make it accessible to people to grasp what's going on. As you and I both know, there's a lot of big players in the real estate data world, but either they go to the dumbing down point where they don't make it understandable because they're trying too hard to be intuitive. And then you have the other side, which goes so far into the weeds that it becomes almost impossible to use the data effectively for making decisions, which is why I love it as a practicing realtor. To me, it's data that is explicable to anybody to help them make great decisions. So looking at these data points, of course, we're in a world where the listeners of my podcast and the viewers of my podcast are a mix of real estate professionals in the real estate vertical, and then regular people who are like, oh, so how exactly does this work? Because as you and I both know, we've talked about before, real estate as a profession is not super transparent or super good at explaining itself. And you've got a bazillion different people out there. So when I look at your report, knowing I'm a residential realtor, my favorite thing on your report is the quadrants at the bottom. And friends who are watching this episode, don't worry, there's going to be a link where you can go get a sample piece of data and for any zip code in the country, and you see what I'm talking about. And I probably should have shared screen, but I just wanted to chat. So when we look at the quadrants for any zip code, I live in North Carolina. I can see in the top 25% of my zip code versus the bottom 25%. How long is something staying on market? And we're in a market right now, Mike, where everybody talks about, oh, every house sold in like 2 seconds and 47 offers for 1,000% of asking price. It's very, very hyperbolic out there, but your data points are actually telling different stories. Why do you think the public is allergic? I guess we'll just say they're allergic to different data points than what they've heard in the anecdotal information they get from friends, family, or social media?
Yeah. So, it's funny, those market segments, those quartiles market segments, 4 market segments is something that we created. I originally created it because I needed it personally. Like I am one of those buyers. So 21 years ago, I was buy the littlest overpriced piece of junk in the most expensive neighborhood person. I bought in the bottom quartile. And in Silicon Valley at the time, so 2001, this is I like to say 2 bubbles ago, the Silicon Valley was this NASDAQ, stock market bubble was
pets.com. That's the pets.com era.
yes, exactly. All kinds of insanity. And so by 2001, that bubble had burst. And so while there was like a mild recession for the whole country, it was big in Silicon Valley. And so in Silicon Valley real estate, all these like multi-million-dollar stock option homes, those deals stopped cold. But at the time, this was when subprime and the mortgage market was really, that bubble was starting to heat up. And so you could get a $1 million mortgage without like any documentation. So you could buy, and in the high end Silicon Valley, the low of that market, like $1 million, but the $3 million homes just evaporated. And so the median price in Los Altos, the town I was buying in, fell by a third in 2002, 2003.
So in a 1 year time span,
like cratered. The median price cratered, but the bottom quartile didn't go anywhere at all, didn't go down at all. And I was sitting there trying to figure out, am I upside down on my mortgage? And so, but I started realizing, like, if you look at my price range, we're just fine. It was a few years later when subprime broke, when they just cut off subprime and things started blowing up. It was 2007. Before that, especially in places in California, like San Jose, a lot of subprime transactions were driving the low end of the market. And in that time in San Jose, that was, $500,000 subprime loans. And when subprime stopped, you could still get that $1 million mortgage. You couldn't get a $500,000 mortgage anymore because those were subprimes. And we could watch the days on market. Normally, expensive homes take longer, cheaper homes go quicker. But all of a sudden, that inverts, and you could see exactly where people would buy. And nobody was buying anything at $500,000. They were only buying stuff at $1 million. $1 million stuff was going quickly. The $500,000 stuff is 6 months because it's all subprime buyers who had evaporated. So using those quartiles was like, you could see exactly where the demand is. You could see exactly how we need to act in that. And it was really, driven by my own need.
Well, and it's also in any given market, there's going to be luxury homes, whatever luxury is defined as. And so if you didn't know this in real estate world, we look at that as the top 10% of any particular zip code is going to be considered luxury. Now, whether or not you personally, the end user, think that's luxury, that's on you, friend, because that's all designed in your head. But in any zip code, it's the top 10. Yeah. So if you think about that, the buyer or seller of what we consider to be luxury real estate very much does not want to be compared to the little stuff in their zip code, because of fit and finish, and then the buyer of the property. And so you do have that stratification of society that is very evident in real estate. And you can see it in the data points of these reports that are fascinating to me. And so I love when I talk to a luxury seller and I show them an Altos report, like, this is the report for your zip code. That's not me. That's not me. I'm not the average. Okay, so look. There is an average, and there's also a median. If you don't know the difference, friends, please go to Khan Academy and educate yourselves. So there's an average, there's a median, there's per square foot, which is not an indicator of value. It is just a point along the way. But luxury people think they're insulated from markets. And one thing we all know, having been around multiple market conditions, that's Mike and our old people, we've seen lots of market conditions. Nobody's insulated from anything. But what he's talking about here was, at his rough point in the Bay Area, being in the lower quadrant did have some insulative effects. And there's a real story there that I think is impactful. You were thinking your house was upside down because the external voices gave you fear. The data itself, though, says, all right, friend, step back from the fear and look at the data. And we're in a market right now, Mike, where we know that the world lives in a constant state of fear, whether it's driven by pandemic or it's driven by the changes in the real estate market, or it's driven by legislative activity at local, state, or national levels. And the fear jumps in every day.
Yep.
So knowing that you're a data guy, what would you say in the market? We're recording this in March of 2021 when my phone every day is a mixture of, is it safe to buy right now, or are we in the bubble? And the other side being, should we sell right now? Is the market about to crash? That's my phone all day, every day.
I get those texts. It's am I buying at the top of the market?
Is the data real?
Yeah. Am I buying at the top of the market? Yeah. And so there's some real current data points that I point people to. That is
in an effort to dispel the fear, right? Because fear should not color your real estate decisions, friends. So listen very carefully to what Mike's about to tell you, because if you want to take fear out of your decision-making, learn how to evaluate data. And we're not suggesting that you take what Mike is saying and then go write a Bible and start selling it and saying, this is the gospel of real estate. We're saying he's got data points that you can understand. So push the fear out and listen. This is how you make great decisions. You can have it back now, Mike. I had to opinion.
The gospel according to Mike. It's a very book. So the fear right now is, am I buying at the peak? Like, do I have to sell now, or is it going to crash? I've literally had both those texts, and information is the antidote to fear. And so for those folks, there's data that I like to point out that like all the leading indicators are very strong for the year. Like demand is high, supply is low. Inventory is low, not just because of the pandemic. It's a decade-long trend of declining inventory. We are, as homeowners buy a next home, because rates are low, it's really affordable, and it's a good deal to keep your first one as a rental property. Now I have two. This one doesn't go back on the market. So each year we have fewer and fewer. So the fact that we're in low inventory is not going to like all of a sudden change. It's going to be low inventory for the foreseeable future, years. The other big trend that's not pandemic related is the millennials are now mid-30s, peak earning and peak home buying time. We got a decade of millennials wanting to buy real estate.
And we should point something out here for anybody listening who's thinking, yes, but I bought my first house when I was 23. Yes, but the millennials have been, as a generation, late in household formation. Yeah. Why are they late in household formation? Because people get married later in life than they used to. We have different family structures than we've had in the past. And let's be honest, those of y'all that are parents of millennials, y'all didn't run them out of your house. When I was 18, it was bye, go to college, then go buy a house, go on. Millennial parents haven't run them off. So it was happening before the pandemic, but the pandemic definitely put the foot on the gas for this. We're all working at home. This is over. So you should know that they are the largest demographic generation ever, more of them than the baby boomers. But they weren't delayed in buying for anything other than that. They weren't experiencing the same motivations that the Generation Xers, but Mike and I are both Gen X, or that those of y'all that are boomers experienced. It's not a bad thing. It's just a factual thing, which happened to be the perfect storm with the space we're in now. And I do have to ask you, though, you're talking about the delay in supply. Do you track housing starts, Mike? Do you track?
So I do, not part of the product. You're a nerd
and you enjoy it. I know it's not in the report.
But housing start wise, if you think the last 20 years or so, or, the first half of the like 90s and 2000s, 1.5 million new construction a year, 1.5 million. Then starting in about 2010, mortgage bubble burst, we were at 500,000. And so we were way under building. And it's just now getting back to that historical normal level. So we underbuilt for a decade. we incentivize more people owning, as mortgages are super cheap. So we now have doubling up and, investment properties, like 7 or 8 million homes went from resale to rental. Like, I'm holding this one for investment property. So that's 8 million coming out of that active inventory stock and into rental. And building fewer. And so all of those things are coming to create this smaller inventory set. One of the reasons I think that the millennials have been slower to create household formation, do household formation, move out, is because the boomers aren't moving either. And so the boomers aren't moving, those houses aren't available. And, and if we're not building enough like quality new senior home, then the boomers don't have a place to move to sell their family home. Like all of these things have been building up, and we're in this for 4, 5, 8 years. Like we've got a long time to reverse that trend.
I'm glad you pointed something out about our seniors when they want to downsize. You snuck it in there. Quality. For too many years, we saw properties being built. Oh, well, when you downsize, just go to a townhouse over here. But if townhouses, for example, were built for the first time buyer and you want the seniors to get the end unit because it's got a master down, they don't want basic carpet and laminate countertops when you're downsizing from your family home that you've been in for 35 years and raised the kids and moved on, and now you want something. You'd like to have something nicer because you tend to be more financially stable at that point and have earned it. And I've experienced this my entire time in real estate when I talk to a downsizer, but where's the nicely finished house? They don't want something that's 5,000 square feet. They'd like to have 1,800 square feet with a nice fit and finish, really good quality, really good upgrades. And now, of course, we're seeing the movement to living in place, which is fantastic for everybody because then you can stay put longer, but there's a lag time. And so when you're looking at the data points, when do you think the supply and demand is somehow going to, and it's never going to go back to a full balance, not with the desire of people to move here and the fact that the mortgage profession is going to have to figure out how to integrate our new neighbors, also known as immigrants, in a way that makes sense because they're going to want to buy a house too and be a part of the American dream. And so you have continuing increased numbers, supply, obviously expenses going up, lumber costs have gone up. When does the supply get anywhere into a balanced territory, Mike?
So
crystal ball, 2 years, a year, 5 years?
Well, so that depends. The interesting angle is, interest rates have been so cheap for so long, a decade. The last decade, the average is 4% of the last decade for a 30-year fixed rate.
Yeah, 40 years at 6.7% because we're old people. These young people, Mike, they don't appreciate cheap money.
It's unbelievable, right? So it's so cheap, and everybody has a cheap mortgage, right? Everybody in the world. And I have a ski house in the mountains, and I refinanced it this year at like 2 point whatever ridiculous amount. Like I wouldn't give myself that loan, Too late,
it's already closed.
Yeah, that's right. But the payments on that house are cheaper than the rent on my apartment was 20 years ago. Right?
Oh, whoa, that's a perspective. Say that one more time. So the payment on
my mountain house, the mortgage payment,
which is a second home, right? So it's a second home mortgage.
It's a second home mortgage, and it's like the payments are now less than the rent that I paid on an apartment 20 years ago.
Which is, again, that adds to the demand side of the equation. So
that's right.
People want to buy, but then when they create more demand to buy, it's driving prices up, but it's still with cheap money. The driving up of prices is still a better deal than
it was a year ago, for sure. So the other thing that's interesting on that, Leigh, is that the low rates are not just impacting demand, they also impact supply because I can afford 2 mortgages. So I don't have to sell the other one. I can double up better. It's a better deal to double up. And so what we noticed though is there was this stretch in 2018, about 10 months, 8 or 10 months of 2018, when rates climbed pretty steadily from like April through December. They climbed from about 3.8% to 4.8%. Yeah, woo. But at 4.8%, we could really see demand back off and supply climb. I look at like the inventory levels year over year. And the only time in the last decade when we had year over year inventory climb, like January to January, was between 18 and 19. So there were more homes for sale January of 19 than there were January of 18. But every other year it's just fallen. And that corresponds to when rates rose from 3.8 to 4.8%. And so there is a threshold when all of a sudden, like consumers say, wow, it's a little more expensive now. And they say it's more expensive to hold my existing and to buy the new. I can only do one. So supply increases and demand decreases. So what's that threshold now? If we're used to 3, is that threshold at 3.5? Is that threshold at 4? It's hard to know, like where consumers start feeling that like payments are too much.
Well, and how much of that is going to be driven by the actual numbers? So back to the data, is it driven by their actual income and expenses, or is it driven by fear? And the reason my brain went in that direction, I was talking with a first-time buyer last night. She's almost 30 and she's buying her first house. She's so excited. Interviewing realtors. She talked to another realtor before she called me who was hammering her. Rates are going up. Rates are going up. We're at 3 1/8. We're at 3 1/4. And if you don't move now, you're not going to be able to afford it. And it completely turned her off. Oh. Because my girl is a PhD candidate. She is not interested in letting emotion drive this decision. And so she was getting hammered by somebody who was absolutely panicked by the idea of that 3.5%, which makes me wonder if there's as much of a monetary threshold as there is a fear threshold, where agents and lenders are going to hit that breaking point with the consumer public that says, all right, this is too much for me. And I have to wonder, because it's such an interconnected space that we're in between emotion and logic.
Right, for sure. And one of the things that happens is, right now, so rates went from 2.6 to 3.1 in the last month. And so that's pretty significant. But what's
it's still free money, it's perspective.
It's still free, right? And it's but the people who are buying now locked their rates in February at the lowest rate. So they're like, I gotta overbid now to get my rate. So there's actually accelerates purchases right now. And so then it could be like when we see like in the people buying in April locking their rates in March, and it may like that as rates climb, the first thing that happens is it accelerates demand. And then, we'll see at some point.
So that little bit of a lag there. So does your data track what the public pays in the way of lock fees? Because when somebody's getting a mortgage, they can pay extra money to their lender to do an extended lock on their interest rate to give themselves time to buy. And of course, buyers almost have to do that right now because they're fighting for houses. Do you track that data, or do you have a resource?
We don't track that data specifically. What's interesting is you can see it in the active market, in that you can see the real time as every new listing gets listed at a higher price. And you can see the one I love in the data is the percentage of homes with price reductions.
I love that one. That's the red flag one.
It's really, really neat, right? It's so, and for your listeners, as a rule of thumb for nationally, you can think of about 35% of homes would overprice and take a price cut before they sell.
And in what time frame? Wait. Right now, like in this?
No, like in general, okay. Long term. Yes. Okay. So 35% would be normal. And it's, in some of the hot California markets, normal is closer to 20, and like Phoenix, it tends to be closer to 40.
So asterisks,
Yeah.
depending on where you are.
It's definitely depending on where, but you can think about normal, right?
Right.
And so when the market is hot, and that, like, homes are overpriced. Sometimes it's a wacky seller. Sometimes it's strategic. It's a listing strategy. Like, there's all kinds of reasons to price it and take the price cut there. But 35%. And so then when the market cools, 35% thought they were overpriced, but all of a sudden 40% need to take a price cut, or 45%. And you say, aha, demand is cooling. And you can see it because the houses, this is before they've sold, you can see how many are taking price cuts, and that's climbing. In hot markets, that might be 25%. Really hot markets, it might be 20%. 35% thought they were overpriced, but some of those got those offers, and they didn't have to cut. And so only 20% had to cut. Right now, nationally, we're at 16%. And it's nuts. It is. That implies, multiple offers. It's everywhere across the country. It's all price points. It's everywhere.
And it doesn't imply you throw any price to the wall and it might
and
happen
it's sticking.
to stick.
Yeah.
So what's happening
even the really wacky sellers, right? They're getting
down or up?
What's up?
Is 16 a decreasing trend line or an increase?
It has been. It's still falling, which meaning it's still getting hotter, right? There are fewer and fewer price reductions that happen, and that happens in the spring anyway, because we get new listings. You get the real good quality and the real buyers. So what happens is June 30. All of a sudden, it's late summer. We got to move this before school, and price reductions start happening. And then October, it's still on the market. We got to move this before Thanksgiving, and price reductions more start happening. So you have a real seasonal pattern that peaks at the holidays. It's lowest like right now in the year because you get the best inventory and the most transactions starting to happen at this time of year. And then it would start going back up again. What happened last year was there was no winter peak. Like, people just bought everything all winter long. And so it just kept going down all year. But the sellers who are nervous, what we can say is right now, we know demand is high. We know demand is, there's multiple offers. It's all price points. We can, even if we price it aggressively high, we're still getting those offers. If you're a nervous seller and you're thinking about maybe selling this year, and you're worried about getting out before the market turns, I'm going to put this Altos report in your inbox every Monday, and just keep your eye on price reductions. And
that's my favorite thing about this report, because it does come out every week, and I can tell my clients, like, watch this. I hadn't thought to have them watch price reductions, so I've always had them watch the category and the quartiles, new versus absorbed, as I love to watch that ratio. So when new outstrips absorbed, to me, that's the warning shot over the bow. But 1 week might be an aberration. 3 weeks in a row.
Yep, that's a really good way to point it out. But in the price, like, for the seller who's like, I'm thinking of selling in the next year, what if I want to get out before before it crashes? Like, you could say, look, price reductions are super low right now. Market's super hot. If they back off from 17 to 20% to 22%, what that's telling you is the market's still hot, but it's on a cooling trend. It's not yet on that trend. So if you want to know when it's time to jump into action, keep your eye on this number.
All right. So what about buyers? What would you say to them based on the data points? What's the best temperature data point to watch for that? So obviously a buyer would like to buy when it's cooling, but before it's completely cold, because then you might not get the best houses, because the best houses may give up and not sell during a challenged market. So if the market over those 3 weeks, when the seller says, all right, I see the cooling, I want to get while the getting's good, what are you saying to a buyer when their agent texts you?
So From my personal experience, I remember, buying, I got bought in Silicon Valley as the NASDAQ bubble was bursting. And I was able to see that house had been overpriced. And all of a sudden, it's on the market. I can see that the median days on market is, 28 days. And this one's on for 50. Like, aha, now I've got a motivated seller. And I was able to use that as a framework for that. I like to use those quartiles, the market segments, to say, if you're an agent working with a buyer, you say, look, in your price range, the median days on market right now, like a lot of these markets is 0. It's like, they're going like
negative days on market.
Yeah, and so. But we were looking around, and I was looking at some markets in Texas this morning, and Austin, anything under $1 million is essentially 0 days. But in San Antonio or El Paso, there's plenty of price points where it's a little cooler, and you use that. So it's like in your price range, like if we want to get the house, we know that we need to offer quickly, offer well. We want to structure and do our process properly. We can watch the market action index, which is that speedometer that, if that's starting to tick down, that's a signal for you that, that the opportunities are starting to open up.
Just so you guys know, when you look at the sample report, the market action index is pretty much a visual indicator of what supply and demand looks like. There is a little line on there that's a balanced market. And you can see pretty easily based on where the arrow goes, if we're in a strong seller's market, a medium or mild seller's market, or in a buyer's market, which we're not in a buyer's market, I don't think anywhere in the country except
anywhere in the country.
Well, maybe in some skyline areas of some metro areas. Because I know that in Charlotte, our skyline area is the only area that's got a few challenges as we figure out what the future is of our skyscrapers, because the large commercial buildings and skyscrapers are trying to figure out what is the future of work from home. And when you bought your condo in that skyscraper environment, to be able to walk to work and walk to restaurants, and the restaurants are closed and you're working from home, that calls into account lifestyle choices. So I know you don't track commercial. I've asked you to, out loud on Twitter many times where my commercial Altos report is, but I know that you watch it because I know who you are. Are you seeing any interesting trend lines in the commercial side that are giving you either optimism or pessimism?
I look at, for example, in San Francisco, we look at San Francisco data a lot, and the San Francisco commercial office space is like, there's a lot of vacancy still. And there's a lot of shakeout to finish there. Rents have come down, but not significantly in some of those areas. I'm encouraged by, if you remember Manhattan after 9/11, it was bleak. It was a ghost town, but only for like 18 months. Mm-hmm. And then it was like people came back and this is New
York. Oh, okay, we're back.
We're back. Yeah, exactly. But for a while, it's like, wow, people may never work in a high rise again, right? That was the fear, right? And because you don't know, and when you're in that part, and it's, of course, it's why it's funny. It's ironic that it's hard for buyers to buy when it's a buyer's market, because it's a buyer's market because everybody's afraid, right?
It's human nature. We buy high and we sell low because why? The fear overtakes the logic. And that's why if you're in a market where you feel the fear starting to get into your head, you need products like what Mike created with Altos Research. And so if you're listening to this or watching this and you have a realtor that you love, you owe it to that realtor to send them this episode so that they will go check out this product so you can have it. And then if you're a realtor, you should know this is one of the 3 tools that I use every day in my business that I won't give up. There's DocuSign, there's Dropbox, and then there's Altos Research, because it's such a wonderful way to make data explicable. And we all need that, especially in a world that's driven by almost everything being colored by opinion, data, when it's drawn from multiple sources, should be somewhat of a North Star, even though you still got to be the grown up and make your own decisions. So, Mike, what's the one thing that you want to leave my audience with as they're ready to go click and get their sample report and go check out what you have? I mean, you might have one tip you want to give them, but I want to know why you devoted your life to real estate data. How did you land in this space? And you're one of the very few that has stuck to your space, because you and I both know a lot of other entrepreneurs made a little quick hit on real estate, moved on to something else, but you have stuck it out with me for over a decade now. So how did you land here and why did you stay?
Well, so I'm a software guy. I'm a data software guy, and I've always done data software. And it's funny because I was not a real estate guy. And I'm in Silicon Valley, and I love the business of data. It's like, I love the product and the creativity of it. And so I was looking over time for many years, like, what company am I going to start that will be a data company? And I literally built the models and the analyses that we use at Altos for my own needs, like, so that I could understand am I upside down on this? I'm 30 years old and I got this giant mortgage. Yeah. And am I upside down on it? Right. And after a while, 15 years ago, there was not a lot of resources. And even the best informed people in the world had no idea what was going on.
No, none. Right?
And the traditional data is like, oh, here's what sold last month or 2 months ago. And you get the headlines are the Case-Shiller number, and the Case-Shiller number that they'll release at the end of March is the January data number for
and
that includes November, December. Yeah. It's like, thanks guys. Like this is what happened, a quarter ago. So when I realized we really had better insight than we could get anywhere in the world, and great realtors obviously know their markets, really special ones can communicate it well, but almost nobody has that combination of those skills. And so that's why we created it. And I enjoyed it. And I've grown real fond of my realtors over the years, Leigh. I really.
Well, but just because you make this accessible, and I'm grateful to you for that. And I'm also grateful for all of the fun conversations we've been able to have when we don't agree on everything, which is frankly my favorite part about getting to look at data with somebody who has a different mind than my own, because I think I'm better for listening to your things that you poke out there. And I know that you're better because you read some of the random stuff that I put out there, because we're teams.
I pay attention.
But I got to ask you one last thing, and this is totally for the conspiracy theorists in the room. So lean in, friends. All right. So has CoreLogic ever tried to buy you?
I cannot confirm nor deny any.
All right, so you signed an NDA because you're better at conveying your information than they are. But CoStar shuttled that. So has CoStar tried to buy you? Because they're run by the mafia, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Well, there are lots of really interesting players in the space. We try to do our best with our product, and for the most people we can. And,
so stay independent then, because we don't need to have everything rolled up into one vertical space. We need to have the mics of the world out there. So if you want to keep the mics of the world out there, friends, you need to go subscribe. You go to altos.re. But of course, all of the links will be in the show notes for this episode.
Yep.
He
also,
didn't pay me, by the way, and I don't get any deals except that Jessica occasionally does send me an extra report for an extra zip code, and I love her for that.
Well, and frankly, let's do this for you. Let's make a coupon for your listeners. We'll call it Leigh 21. And so when you sign up for Altos and use the coupon code Leigh 21, we'll give you a discount, and I'll go make that. We'll go make that as soon as we get off the phone here, and everybody can use it.
See, there you go. That happened right here, which is what happens when you deal with the owner of the company who loves data and loves realtors. And if you need help explaining it, then I'll help you understand it. Mike will help you understand it. And Jessica is awesome and super responsive. She can.
We have a new ebook. Have you seen the ebook that we made?
No, I have missed your ebook. Is it helpful?
it is helpful. It is a lot of what we talked about today. It's how to use market data in your real estate business, and it's looking at the reports. It's how to read the reports. It's some scripts, when to use the reports in your conversations. You may be quoted in there, Leigh.
Okay, good, because I haven't seen it. So I'll have to look at that, and then we'll toss it out there to you guys. So we'll get a link to that as well in the show notes here. I know that y'all were listening and trying to absorb, or watching and trying to absorb. Never fret, because everything you need is in the show notes for the episode. Mike, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see you in person, maybe at NAR. You get a big fat hug, because I ain't scared of no damn COVID when I need to hug some humans. And I appreciate all that you've done for the profession over all these years. So keep that shit up. And if CoStar tries to buy you, then I'm going to be very upset.
I'll tell them that Leigh Brown has a competitive offer.
No, because they'll send a hit out on me. I'm scared of that company.
Okay.
All right, guys. You got all your information, Mike. Thank you.
Leigh, you're the best.
Make sure you guys subscribe for more, because you don't know what you're ever going to encounter here on the podcast, and I'll help you any way I can. And we'll see you next time.